Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Here we go, finishing off Battles of the American Civil War, Behind the Battles, War Crime editions. This time I'm going to wrap it up, this little 4-episode stretch with some guerrilla warfare that the South had going on. The Saltville Massacre, the Centralia Massacre, and we'll take another quick relook at the Lawrence Massacre, all of which had indiscriminate killing of either civilians or wounded and unarmed black soldiers. So they loved doing that.
Yeah, racist Democrats.
We'll start off with Saltville, October 1864. So on paper, it doesn't look like the kind of place that should decide the fate of anything. It's a small town tucked into Appalachian hills. But underneath the dirt is one thing Confederacy can't live without: salt. Salt. It's how you keep meat from rotting. It's how you feed armies and horses in cities when the weather turns hot. Don't know what that has to do with anything. By late 1864, the Confederacy is starving. Saltville's big salt works. They're a lifeline. Take those away, you're not just hurting Southern morale, you're taking food out of their mouths. The Union, they know it. So they sent a raiding force out of Kentucky under Brigadier General Stephen Burbridge. He got about 5,000 men, cavalry, mounted infantry. And tucked inside a column is a brand new unit that half the army doesn't even respect. That's the 5th United States Colored Cavalry.
Well, most of those men had been enslaved not long before this. They have had almost no training, lousy equipment, and plenty of abuse from the white soldiers who think this whole idea of black men in blue uniforms is a joke. They get the worst horses, the worst guns, and all the jokes. The worst jokes, too. But the men of the 5th did not come to entertain anybody. They came to fight. Old Burbridge has one job: ride through the passes, punch the Confederates aside, hit Saltville, and smash those salt works. The only problem is, this is Virginia mountain country. The roads are bad, the hills are steep. And the old Rebs, they're not asleep. As Burbridge tries to push his way east, he runs into Confederate forces under Alfred Jackson and a mix of regular troops, home guards, and local militia. Every time the Union tries to squeeze through a gap, climb a ridge, somebody in gray is up there with a cannon, a rifle, or sometimes both.
By the time the Union column finally closes in on Saltville, the defenders have had time to dig in on the high ground. Earthworks, rifle pits, artillery on the heights looking down over the open slopes. You don't want that.
Mm-mm.
Exactly the kind of place you don't want to be charging on foot if you like being alive, that is. So, of course, they send the 5th United States Colored Cavalry up the hill. You're in the regiment, right? You have had maybe 3 weeks of serious training. Your saddle doesn't fit. Your carbine's not great. You're going uphill in the open, straight at dug-in Confederates who don't want to stop you. They literally want to murder you.
Right.
A black man in a Union uniform terrifies and enrages them in equal measure. The Confederates load grape and canister into their cannons. When it fires, the air in front of you turns into flying metal. The 5th, they charge anyways. What else are they going to do?
All right. Well, even some Rebs admitted later that they had never seen men fight like this. Wave after wave, black troopers keep going up that hill while their friends are being cut down in front of them. Horses dropping, saddles empty, and men running on foot, still trying to close the distance. It is brave, it is heroic, and it's not enough. By the end of the day, the Union attack stalled. Burbridge's forces mauled. Total casualties, well, it'll be somewhere in the hundreds, with the Union taking the worst of those casualties.
Yeah.
The old Rebs, they hold the heights. They hold the salt works. They hold the town.
Yeah, but that's not why we're here, because on the surface, it looks just like another failed raid. Another Confederate defensive win that buys the South a little more time and a little more salt. A little more salt for the wounds of the Union soldiers as well. The real story, what happens after dark.
Oh, man.
Burbridge, he pulls back. He can't take everyone with him. The field is littered with wounded. Union surgeons set up improvised hospitals, including at Emory and Henry College and the nearby town of Emory. Wounded men from Ohio, Kentucky, and those black troopers from the 5th, they're lying in barns and halls and classrooms turned into makeshift wards.
Oh, shit.
They're off the field, unarmed, bandaged, waiting for someone to decide what happens next. Where are we going to go?
All right, home.
And that someone is not a committee in Washington. Unfortunately for them, it's a group of Confederates who have spent the last few years riding the borderlands like an outlaw gang in gray. And that's where we enter Champ Ferguson.
Oh, old Ferguson, this guy. If you're building Civil War's most wanted lists, you guess what, Ferguson? Near the top. A pro-Confederate guerrilla from Tennessee. He has been running his own personal war from day one. Ambushes, executions, revenge killings. His reputation, simple. If he thinks you're a Union man, he thinks you should be dead. After Saltville, as the smoke is clearing, men like Ferguson and other irregulars, they move across the battlefield. They're not bringing stretchers. No, they're bringing the Grim Reaper along with them. Witnesses later talk about wounded black soldiers being shot where they lay. Some Rebs brag in letters that they slew Negroes that day and felt no shame at all because they're a fifth of a human. There are stories of Ferguson walking calmly among the wounded at the hospital, picking out men in blue uniforms, black and white, put bullets in them at close range. One Union officer, Lieutenant Elza Smith, he's said to have been shot in the head in his bed. Other wounded black troopers from the 5th never even make it out of those rooms alive. Dang, that's war crime right there. He should be hung.
Right, well, he does. Well, the numbers are obviously like every battle we've ever covered, and they'll be debated. Some early reports talk about a handful of killings. Others say dozens. Modern estimates usually land somewhere around 45 to 50 black soldiers murdered after the battle.
Jeez.
Who were no longer even fighting and no longer a threat.
Man.
Enough that it earned its own name, the Saltville Massacre. And it's not the kind of moment you can write off as two sides shooting at each other during the fog. No shit. It's men stepping over bodies to get to the ones who are still breathing, making choices with full control of their trigger finger. Regular Confederate troops eventually arrive in greater numbers, and some sources suggest that once firmly organized units take charge of the prisoners, the worst of the killing stop.
Oh, sure.
But by then, damage is done.
Mm-hmm.
Word spread. Stories leak out. For black troops across the Union, Saltville joins a growing list that already has Fort Pillow on it. And we're about to add a couple more before the war's over.
Fight hard. And if you fall into Confederate hands, God help you. The massacre does not destroy the 5th United States Colored Cavalry. No, it does not. Survivors go on to fight again and again. But the regiment will never forget Saltville. Many of the men, this is the moment when the masks come off and they see exactly what they're up against. The Union High Command hears about it. Newspapers hear about it. And for once, somebody pays. When the war ends, Champ Ferguson is hauled into a military courtroom. Not as a hero, no. Not as some noble freedom fighter, but as a murderer. They put him on trial, go through a long list of names. Some deaths happen in battle, some are disputed, others not. Below it all sits Saltville, with witnesses talking about wounded men in beds and the man who walked in and shot them. In the very end, Ferguson is convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to hang. He swings from a rope in Nashville in the fall of 1865. One of the very few men from either side to be executed specifically for what we would now call war crimes.
The other being the former warden guy of Fort Anderson, or Andersonville Prison, which we talked about already in an episode.
Right.
Well, Saltville, it doesn't become a tourist stop. Never gets the fame of Gettysburg or Antietam, but for students of the war, especially for anyone looking at the story of the black soldiers in Union blue, it sits there like a scar on the map. A reminder that for some men, the idea of a black soldier was so offensive they would rather shoot a wounded man in a hospital bed than let him live to tell the tale. Salt Works, they're finally destroyed a couple months later at the Second Battle of Saltville. That's when George Stoneman comes back with another raid and finishes the job that Burbridge couldn't. The Confederates, they lose their salt, they lose the war, they lose their dignity, and the country stumbles into Reconstruction. Everybody pretends they're ready to move on. Saltville, they don't. Hangs there in the background like an old crime scene photo shoved in the back of the file. For all the talk about honor and gallantry and brother against brother, the Civil War also had moments that looked a lot more like gangland hits than grand strategy. Men like old Champ Ferguson turned whole regions into their personal killing grounds. And on cold October day in Virginia, the wounded of the 5th United States Colored Cavalry paid the price. And that leads us to the Centralia Massacre, which we don't think we've even touched on this at all in any other episodes.
Probably not. Well, there's outlaw stories that stay in the bank vaults and saloons. And then there's the ones that start with a train, end in a cornfield, and leave the ground so soaked in blood that the locals are still talking about it 150 years later. Today, we are in mid-Missouri. September 27th, 1864. A little railroad town called Centralia. On paper, nothing special. A depot, there's a hotel, a couple stores, farms all the way around. But Centralia, well, has the misfortune of sitting right in the middle of Civil War Missouri, which means it is not really a town anymore. It's a target. By this point in the war, Missouri is less of a state and more of a knife fight. You've got Union militia, you got Confederate regulators, you got Kansas Jayhawkers, you got Missouri bushwhackers, and everybody has a score to settle. There's no clean front line. There's just whoever's armed, whoever's unlucky. And riding into that mess is one of the nastiest names the war ever produced. You guessed it. Bloody Bill William Anderson.
Yep, Quantrill's Raiders are the celebrity gang of the Missouri bushwhacker scene. Old Bloody Bill is the guy who looked at Quantrill and said, "You're not going far enough." Scalping, mutilation, no quarter. This is not a man interested in prisoner exchanges and polite surrenders. His whole reputation is built on scaring the hell out of anyone in blue. And on the morning of September 27th, Anderson and roughly 80 guerrillas came into Centralia like they owned it. Long hair, pistols on their belts, Union jackets stolen off dead men. Some of them with bits of uniforms from 3 different armies on at once. Hey. Among them, a young ex-farm kid who will go on to be famous for robbing banks instead of trains.
Oh.
You know him as Jesse James. But today, he's not an outlaw yet. He's just a Confederate guerrilla, taking part in a massacre. He's taking notes from Bloody Bill on how to make a name for himself. Well, all these guerrillas, they hit the town hard, and they hit the town hard and fast.
Oh.
They raid the stores, grab whatever they want, force the locals to cook for them.
Oh.
Barrels get tapped, whiskey starts a-flowing. Even stop a stagecoach and rob the passengers, because if you're already committing one crime spree before lunch, why not add another one on the list?
Right.
Then they hear it. A train whistle in the distance.
Oh. Well, now a train in 1864 is a big deal. It's money, mail, it's news, manpower, all rolled into one. This one, well, it's coming from the east, headed towards St. Louis. Anderson's men ride out, flag it down just outside of town. Guns out, horses prancing, bushwhackers grinning through tobacco smoke. The engineer does the math and stops. The guerrillas swarm the cars. They're not here for the civilians, no, though they'll rob a few. They're hunting uniforms. On board are Union enlisted men heading home on furlough. They're unarmed. They're relaxed. Probably thinking more about their families than about ambushes. Like, what the hell's going on here? Or Anderson. He has them hauled out of the cars, lined up alongside the track. Depending on who you read, there are about 24 of them. 23, 24, all in blue. No rifles, no bayonets. Just travel clothes and leave papers. One of them is a sergeant named Thomas Goodman. Oh, Bloody Bill, or one of his lieutenants. He tells the line, they want a volunteer to step forward. Come on, when you guys step forward.
Well, when you're an unarmed Union soldier standing in front of a bunch of men whose nickname for their boss is Bloody, you know what's about to come. You step forward. Odds are they shoot you first. Nobody moves. They ask again. Finally, Sergeant Goodman steps out, figuring he's about to take one for the team. Instead, Anderson grabs him, pulls him aside. Then the guerrillas open fire on the rest. The men in blue standing where Goodman had been are cut down at close range. Some are shot in the back as they try to run.
Wow.
A few are finished off on the ground. Several of the bodies are mutilated afterwards. Scalped, faces slashed, clothes stripped.
Jeez.
The civilians on the train, they get to stand there and watch it happen. When it's over, the bushwhackers torch the locomotive and some of the cars, leaving Sergeant Goodman alive as a captive and ride back towards their camp southeast of town.
Oh, wow.
They leave behind burned rolling stock and a row of dead men thrown into shallow, hurried graves. Why even bury them?
Right.
That alone will be enough to get you into the war's Hall of Shame. But they're not done with Centralia, not yet.
Oh, news of the massacre does not take long to spread. By that very afternoon, Union Major A.V.E. Johnson of the 39th Missouri Mounted Infantry, he's gotten this very word of what just happened. He's got a few companies of raw troops, maybe 120 men, riding out of the area around Hallsville in Mexico, Missouri. These are not grizzled veterans, no. A lot of them have barely been shot at in anger. But they have just heard about the Union soldiers murdered on a siding And that flips a switch. These guys are pissed. They want revenge. Johnson pushes his men hard towards Centralia. When they get there, they find Anderson's gang already gone from the depot, but the town's still smoldering from the morning's visit. Dead men and charred train. Locals shaken and angry. Johnson hears that the bushwhackers have a camp about a few miles away in the fields and timber. He decides, we're going to go get them boys. Out on the prairie near Centralia, Anderson and his men are resting. Horses grazing, loot gathered, drunk on whiskey and adrenaline. They're not expecting a full Union regiment. Nope. They're only expecting a small detachment.
But that's what they're ready for. They pick their ground on a low rise near some timber and brush where they can disappear and then come roaring out of cover. Anderson lines his men out in a loose front with more riders concealed on the flanks. Johnson, he rides up with his column in marching order, rifles and carbines. Most of these are mounted infantry, not battle-hardened cavalry. He sends a small skirmish line forward on foot. They trade a few shots with the bushwhackers, who then start to fall back. Johnson's eye, it looks like the guerrillas are breaking. To Anderson, it's bait. Johnson orders a full charge. His men swing into a gallop across open ground toward that thin line of bushwhackers. At the last second, Anderson's force whips around and comes straight at him, revolvers ablazing. Here's the thing about guerrillas like Bloody Bill's crew. They don't fight like regulars. Where a Union soldier might have a rifle and a bayonet, these guys have 2, 3, 4 pistols each, plus knives. They close in tight, dumping shot after shot in near point-blank range. While Johnson's men are still trying to get off a couple of carbine rounds, the bushwhackers are already on top of them. The Union line disintegrates almost instantly.
Sure in the fuck does. Horses go down, riders go under. Men fall in the first volley. They get trampled. They get shot again as the guerrillas ride through them. Wheel, and then they come back. Some of the 39th try to run for the trees.
Run for the trees.
Anderson's men run them down. Some throw up their hands to surrender. Guess what,
They don't
boys?
do that.
What is that? The killing spills off the field and into the corn and grass around it. Later accounts talk about heads blown up, bodies mutilated, men stripped of boots and clothes. At least one Union soldier is reportedly scalped. Some are shot after the fighting stops, executed where they are found hiding. By the time it is over, Johnson is dead. His body left so riddled and abused that some witnesses claim they could barely recognize him. Of this roughly 120 men, over 100 are killed outright or hunted down in the aftermath. A handful escape. Some are chased for miles. On paper, it's a skirmish. In reality, slaughter.
And that's why Centralia will go down in the record books for 2 numbers. The 24 unarmed soldiers executed at the tracks, and the staggering kill rate on Johnson's command that afternoon. In terms of percentage of a unit wiped out in a single engagement, the 39th Missouri is near the very top of the Civil War's grim leaderboard. And riding in the middle of it all is old Bloody Bill Anderson. This legend cemented in gun-smoking blood with a young Jesse James supposedly watching and learning exactly what fear looks like when you apply it at scale. For the Union side, Centralia is proof of what everybody in Missouri already suspects. It's not a gentleman's war. It's a vendetta. For the Confederates, even some of the regular officers are not comfortable. They might hate the Yankees, but there's a difference between beating an enemy in a fair fight and massacring prisoners on leave in front of civilians.
Right.
Guerrilla warfare erases that line, then stomps on the eraser. Within a month, Anderson himself dead. Shot from his saddle in another fight with Union troops. His body put on display as proof the nightmare is over. Doesn't really help, though. The memory of Centralia is already baked into people's minds. The railroads keep running. The town rebuilds. Corn gets planted again in the fields. For anyone who knows the story, that stretch of ground outside Centralia is not just another Missouri pasture.
It's a place where a train stopped. 24 unarmed men got pulled off. And a small Union command rode into a trap that turned a war into something that looked a lot more like an organized moida. That is the Centralia Massacre. Not a bang job, not a saloon shooting, not a mob hit in the big city. Nope, just a quiet little town on the prairie that had the bad luck to cross paths with one of the meanest guerrillas the Civil War ever produced. And in the rap sheet of outlaws and gunslingers, that earns Bloody Bill Anderson his own ugly page. This is because sometimes the worst crimes do not belong to the guys in fedoras and pinstripes. Nope. Sometimes they're riding horses, wearing stolen uniforms, and calling it a cause.
That leads us to the old Lawrence Massacre, and what a massacre it was. We're in the summer of 1863. No place proved my point better than Lawrence, Kansas. It's August 21st, a little after sunrise, the doors of hell opened, and the devil himself, William Clarke Quantrill, rode out of them doors with 400 men behind him.
Ooh.
Wasn't a raid, wasn't a skirmish. This was a hit. And everybody in Lawrence was on the list. You just made the list.
Oh.
Before we get to the burning buildings and gun smoke, you have to understand why eastern Kansas had a bullseye on it. The Civil War didn't start in Charleston or Richmond. It started right here. Bleeding Kansas. We did a whole episode on that.
Right.
A borderland where slavery and freedom took baseball bats to each other years before the rest of the country followed. Pro-slavery Missourians versus anti-slavery Kansans. Bushwhackers, Jayhawkers. Everyone carrying a rifle, a pistol, and about 5 years' worth of grudges.
No.
Now you got to mix that in with the fact that Lawrence was the hotbed of abolitionist politics. It was a stronghold of the Free State movement. It was a town where pro-slavery Missourians said every man walking down the street thought they were better than you. And then add one more ingredient. Revenge.
August 1863. A jail in Kansas City collapsed. And not just any jail. The one holding the wives, the sisters, and daughters of the Missouri guerrillas. A structural failure killed several women and injured more. To the Union, it was an accident. But to the Bushwhackers, it was straight up moida. And that's when Quantrill steps in. Quantrill is the closest thing that the Confederacy has to an outlaw rock star. He's a former school teacher turned guerrilla leader who rides with a long coat, twin pistols, and a personal list of names he wants dead. He has a simple plan. Ride into Lawrence, kill every adult male, torch it down, leave nothing behind but rubble and screams. He gathers about 450 riders, the worst of the worst. Bloody Bill's there. George Todd, he's there. Cole Younger, he's also there. And then there's this 50-year-old.
50.
There's this 15-year-old. Oh, Jesse James. He might be riding nearby with another group of guerrillas at the time as well. Depending on who you believe.
Never been proven, but...
Either way, the whole pantheon of future outlaws, they're at this very location. Before dawn, August 21st, they crossed the border from a zoo. No lanterns, no bugles, just the quiet sound of 400 horses jogging toward a target. That still has no idea it's about to become the most famous crime scene of the Civil War.
I don't think it's very quiet.
Right. Around 5 a.m., Lawrence wakes up to the worst alarm clock ever invented. The sound of gunfire.
Quantrill's men slam into the town like a sledgehammer. They split into squads, already knowing exactly who they're hunting. They have lists of names. They got prominent Kansas officials, abolitionist leaders, Union militia officers, newspaper editors. If your name's on the list, your day is about to end violently. They start setting buildings on fire immediately. Hotels, stores, saloons, houses, all of them. Flames lick the morning sky as squads ride down the street shooting any man they see. Doesn't matter if he's in uniform or in his nightshirt. If he's male and breathing, he's fair game.
Damn.
Some men try to run for the river. They're cut down before they make it 10 yards. Others hide in wells, barns, and root cellars. The bushwhackers go house to house, calling people out, then firing before the door even fully opens. Witnesses talk about men begging for their lives. Some are shot in their knees. Some are even shot in their beds. A few were executed in front of their families.
Damn.
Quantrill himself rides calmly down Massachusetts Street, directing squads like he's running a twisted military parade. His men pour whiskey in the street and light it. Fire runs along the gutters, windows shatter, horses rear up, spooked by the roar of flames and pistols. In one hotel, bushwhackers force men into the lobby, line them up, and gun them down at point-blank range.
Damn.
At a nearby house, a man tries to shoot his sons. They shoot him first, and then they shoot him first, and then his sons.
Oh, fuck. Wow, there's one story. It says a group of men try to flee across the cornfield. Well, the guerrillas ride into the rows, firing pistols, dropping bodies between the stalks. The whole massacre lasts roughly 4 hours. 4 hours of killing. 4 hours of torching buildings. 4 hours where humanity isn't just optional. It's actively discouraged. About 150 to maybe as many as 180 men and boys dead by the time Quantrill's men form up again outside of town. That's not battle casualties. That's a murder fucking spree. They leave Lawrence looking like a city that had a meteor dropped on it. Over 180 buildings burned. Whole blocks scorched down to the chimneys. Quantrill had promised his men loot if they succeeded. They take everything. horses, watches, rifles, silverware, whiskey, coats, jewelry. One bushwhacker rides off wearing 3 top hats stacked on top of one another, just to mock the town.
Jeez.
And then, just as fast as they appeared, they're gone. Union cavalry shows up too late, finds the smoking ruins, and hears the stories of survivors still shaking in the boots.
And what follows will shape the entire war in Missouri. The Union forces unleash retaliation with the same fury. Families suspected of helping guerrillas are rounded up, homes are seized, and within days, Union General Thomas Ewing signs General Order Number 11, which we talked about last episode.
Yeah.
It says the mass evacuation of 4 Missouri counties, which we know as the Burnt District. Lawrence don't just burn the town, it burns whatever was left of restraint in the border war. Quantrill, Anderson, Todd, they become legends, not the good kind. The kind whispered about in bars long after midnight. To some of the Confederacy, they're heroes of resistance. To the Union, they're the devil's own triggermen. To historians, there's what happened when a civil war turns into personal vengeance with pistols. Lawrence rebuilds, always does. Inside the town, there's a street where ghosts don't sleep. That's Massachusetts Street. Because the Lawrence Massacre isn't just a tragic event. It's a reminder that once you tell men they're justified in anything, absolutely anything, they'll show you how imaginative cruelty can get when you mix ideology with an empty conscience. Right. And lots of whiskey. And on that August morning, the sun rose over a crime that looked less like a raid and more like a chapter ripped out of a serial killer's notebook. Mm. That's the Lawrence Massacre. Another entry in the outlaw files where the line between soldier and murderer wasn't just crossed. It was flat out erased with fire.
Oh, wow.
Now, before we go, though, we obviously know why the Lawrence Massacre was a war crime and atrocity. But take a look at why people consider the Saltville. Well, we know why those two, but... Right. Why it's considered today, it would be. Well, even back then, I guess. Like we said, while the soldiers were in makeshift hospitals, they weren't fighting anymore, number one. They weren't a threat. They were men on stretchers, men with bandages, men waiting for treatment. And that's exactly when the Confederate irregulars and guerrillas stepped in. They didn't guard the wounded. They didn't give medical aid. They walked up to bed. They walked bed to bed and shot the men who couldn't stand up. Some were killed in the field hospitals. Some were dragged outside. Some were executed on the ground where they'd fallen earlier that day. And that is why Saltville crosses into atrocity territory. Right. When a man is too hurt to fight, you don't get to empty a revolver right into his face. No. Not today, not then, not under any rule book written in any century. Well, I don't know. Well, the Mongols did some pretty shit. Right. Crazy shit. Even the Union's own wartime code, the Lieber Code of 1863, said you can't harm a wounded prisoner. And by modern standards and the Geneva Conventions, this isn't a violation. Just a violation. It's one of the clearest types of war crime that exists. Right. Saltville wasn't a battle. It was a cleanup job carried out with hate and loaded pistols. And that's why historians and anybody with a brain don't hesitate to call it what it was, an atrocity of war.
Sure and fuck was. Let's see how they classify Centralia. No rifles, no bayonets, just travel papers in their pockets, Union soldiers on a train. Bloody Bill Anderson and his bushwhackers stop the train, drag the soldiers off, line them up, execute them one by one. As we said, some are shot in the back, some are mutilated after death. These are not combatants. These are prisoners, and prisoners aren't targets. The second act of that ambush, well, it was the ambush of Major Johnson's men in the cornfields. Now, this part begins as a battle. Yeah. There's guns on both sides, shots fired. But when the Union soldiers throw up their hands, the guerrillas are like, no quarter. Men who give up the fight are killed on spot. Some are scalped, some are found stripped and shot in the head. And that's the key point. Once a soldier surrenders, the war ends for that guy. You don't get to shoot him because he picked the wrong uniform. Executing prisoners of war has been outlawed in every set of war rules since nations started writing them down. You can't argue tactics. You can argue desperation, but you cannot argue this. What happened at Centralia wasn't warfare. It was murder.
Moida. And they both count as atrocities, obviously, because they both have one thing in common. None of the victims were fighting anymore. We know that. Right. That's what makes these two events stand apart. Not the number of bodies, not the location, not the units involved. It's the choices made after the fighting should have been over. Saltville shows racial hatred turned into execution. Centralia shows revenge turned into massacre. That's why both events sit on the same shelf as the worst atrocities of the Civil War. The moments where the war stopped being about armies and turned into something a whole lot darker and a whole lot bloodier.
Yeah, ridiculous. Garbage.
Yeah. Ridiculous. Garbage.
Wow.
And that, my friends,
Crazy.
we've covered all of the major atrocities by both sides. There's plenty of more smaller versions where people went into villages and did some pretty fucked up things. But
Yeah.
obviously these are the ones history remembers the most. So there you go. We got several instances on both sides because both sides were both pieces of shit during the war. And next week we'll return to regular scheduled programming as we will be taking on a Union general.
Somebody.
It's going to be somebody we got a lot to choose from. So, yeah, we'll be back with a Union guy and some more profiling and styling and limousine riding.
Oh.
So then, give us a shout. Give us a subscription. Comment, like, subscribe. That's a subscription. And give us a review and share some with your friends. We'll be back next week for a Union general profile on Battles of the American Civil War, Behind the Battles, where the month of Michigan is a week ago.